And I'm trying to figure out if that, no, hang on, sorry. Trying to make sure that you can see. I'm gonna re-share my screen just so that I've got it where I want it to be. Okay, here we go. So I want to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with okayso today, and just tell you a little bit about sort of how we built it, why we built it, where we've gone to over the past couple of years, and sort of where we're headed in the future. And so when we think about using technology to do sexuality education work, we all know, and I've heard some of these statistics mentioned already today, that there is a huge need for more sexual health resources out there for young people. Only half of public schools require medically accurate sex education, right? 7 states prohibit teachers by law from talking about LGBT young people. 41% of women describe their first sexual experience as wanted, right? So we have huge issues around what's going on with consent, and just generally sort of a lot of young people that we know who are feeling worried, stressed out, feeling a lot of shame, fear, etc., around all of these topics. And one of the issues that we see is that really there's sort of no WebMD for a lot of the kinds of questions that young people have. And so when we were thinking about sort of how to use technology, we were really thinking about how are young people currently using technology to access information. And when young people have questions, what we often see is that some of those questions, it might be easy to type something into Google and get a response that you can trust. But often what's happening is that young people all of our questions that we have are complex. They're often very personal to who we are. And so when we type something in, we often don't get a response that's very helpful for us. So Google kind of lacks a lot of nuance. It leaves young people to sort of parse things out on their own. The chatbots that are out there are probably not very empathetic. They can't handle very complex questions. And sometimes we might want to ask our friends, and sometimes our friends are going to be very judgmental, or we don't want to sort of reveal something that personal to our friends. The other thing that we see a lot around answering sexual health questions, and everyone who's working with young people, I'm sure you experience this all the time, is that folks' questions don't come from nowhere, right? They're sort of situated in the world that we're all living in. And so often in order to answer a question, you find yourself in a place of also needing to start to deconstruct some of the major concepts in the world that we have around gender, around sexuality, around race and class, and all of these kind of social norms that we have that often lead to some really damaging sort of ideas around sexual health. And so what that means is that really, in order to get beyond the initial question, we have to dig a little deeper. There's an example question that we got very early on in okayso that I use all the time from a young man who said, my girlfriend thinks because I want to use condoms, that means I'm cheating on her. What do I tell her? And I love this example question because it really gets at the idea that what we have to talk about in order to help him have that conversation are so many different things, right? How we think about safer sex, how we think about monogamy and intimacy and relationships, how we think about the roles of who's responsible for safer sex. All of those things are sort of coming into play as we try to figure out how to help him have that conversation. So what we really need is the ability not only to provide high quality curriculum for young people, but also when they have individual questions and issues, to be able to really dig deep with them and figure out what's going on and kind of not only help maybe change their behavior, but the way that I like to think about it is to see what we can do to almost shift worldviews. And so for us in creating okayso, what we were really trying to think about was, how do we scale the ability to do that? How do we create, using technology, a way to do nuance, empathy, and trust over tech in a way where we can serve hundreds or thousands of young people every year? And so this is what we ended up building. We spent a lot of time talking with young people, like hundreds of interviews with folks, and we're constantly doing user testing with people to make sure that we're sort of hitting the right thing. But okayso is a free mobile app, and it connects young people with questions about sex, dating, identity, etc., to teams of volunteer experts who provide personalized support and information. So when a young person creates an account on okayso, they get to create their own username and they pick an avatar. So they're totally anonymous to our experts. They then pick a team of experts based on the topic area of their question. And when they click into that team, they can see a little bit about each expert in the team. Then they type their question in and send it off, and the experts respond. The experts work in teams, which means it really functions like a group chat. So we start all of our conversations with a lot of empathy. When we train our experts, that's one of the main things that we talk about, is that we have to be as human as we possibly can because we're not sitting with them in person. So we really try to kind of to beef that up as much as possible. And so when our experts respond, they start with empathy, and then any expert who wants to can chime in. So we often see more than one expert participating in a conversation, which is really fun because it means that our users get multiple perspectives. They get to hear from different kinds of people from different walks of life, and that can be really meaningful for them as they're trying to sort of sort out a problem. And I will say, as an expert, it's really fun to jump into a conversation and realize that you have something to contribute that hasn't been said already. It's kind of an extra bonus. So as I mentioned, when we're supporting young people remotely, we sort of have three things that we're training our experts to do that I think really helps us connect with users and helps them have the experience that we want them to have, which is that they're feeling really kind of taken care of. And so that first piece is really starting with empathy as much as we can. And then when we're providing information, we really try to take advantage of the fact that we're chatting with folks online. And so we're providing information, but we're keeping it brief. We don't want people to have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll to read a whole bunch of different options. So I often say to our experts that if they find themselves in the place of saying, well, if A is the thing that's happening to you, then da 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 da, or if B is the thing that's happening, like, we don't have to do that. We can just say, can you help me understand a little bit more? Or what would you like to talk about first? Or you mentioned a lot of things there that are going on for you. Where would you like to start, or what feels most important to you? Or here's a basic definition. What questions do you have? So we really try to keep it as back and forth as much as we can, and really let the young person guide the conversation in the way that they want it to go, so that it feels as personal to their needs as possible, and so that we're really meeting them wherever they are kind of in that moment. And then the other thing that we try to do is to really be as human as we can be. So our experts, you can see their photos, you can read a bit about them, and users can see their photos sort of in the chat, just to remember that they are real human beings. And then we really encourage our experts to be themselves, right? And I think sometimes we can get a little formal over text. We feel like we're reading an article. And so we use emojis. We'll use like OMGs, one of my favorites, or just to say like, oof, right? That sucks, and I'm so sorry. And so we're not texting with our friends exactly. So we don't want to say things like, oh, F that guy, you should just break up with him, right? We want to still be professional, but we also want to remember that we're human and use some of those elements that we might use in texting with a friend and kind of bring them into this context. So these are some of our experts, because folks always want to know a little bit about the expert side. So as I mentioned, our experts are all volunteers. We ask them for about 15 to 30 minutes of their time every day, and we call it micro-volunteering. So what we found when we were talking with people during kind of our initial phases was that often people want to give back. In a lot of ways, we all want to give back to our communities, and sexuality educators often want to do that with the knowledge that they already have. However, there's sort of no way to get involved in a volunteer capacity in our world. And what we also found was that often when we sign up to volunteer for something, we're very kind of optimistic about that we're going to get up on Saturday morning and do that. And then when Saturday morning rolls around, we're like, oh, I just want to sleep in and like hang out at home. And that volunteer shifts can be hard for folks to schedule around. I lived in New York City for 20 years, and there's a co-op there. And maybe every person I know who's ever been a member of that co-op has complained to me about having to go do their co-op shift. So we didn't want to create that kind of experience for our experts. We wanted it really to fit seamlessly into their lives. And so because it's on their phone, because they work in teams, they can hop in and out. And so it really means that when they have a few spare moments, instead of refreshing Instagram for the 10th time that day, they can open okayso and spend a few minutes contributing to a conversation and helping someone. All of our experts are folks who have some kind of training in sexual health. So they might be a peer health educator. They might have an undergrad degree or a graduate degree. We have a couple of PhDs. We have a medical student or two or a nursing student. So it's a wide range of people. And we assign them to their teams based on their areas of expertise and the things that they really enjoy talking about. And then we vet them. They go through an application process. We train them. And then because they work in teams, what's really lovely about that is that everyone's sort of on their best behavior. Right? You want to kind of put your best foot forward when you know that your colleagues are going to be reading the things that you're writing. And there's kind of the additional opportunity for our experts to learn from the other experts in the teams. So I frequently sort of see a question and am excited to see how someone else is going to answer it so that I can learn from them. So it's really fun. We've got, I saw a question that how often do the experts receive training? So we do an initial training for folks that is really about how to use okayso and what the user experience, how to sort of provide the user experience that we're looking for. But we don't train on content because all of our experts have some formal training in their content areas already. So we kind of rely on that piece. But we do have bi-monthly expert hangouts. So every other month, our experts get together and they get to hear from another expert. So this past expert hangout we have an infectious disease epidemiologist on our expert team who actually used to work with the Wuhan virology group. And so she has a particular expertise in COVID-related things. And so she gave a great overview, and we talked a bit about how to support users during this time, because we do have a COVID team now that we've created on okayso to answer those specific types of questions. And then we've done sessions on intimate partner violence, on user experience, on gender neutrality in our responses, and supporting trans and gender nonconforming users. So all sorts of different topics that we sort of do continuing education. And I think as anyone who's a sexuality educator knows, other than conferences, there's not a lot of other opportunities for continuing education the way that attorneys or doctors or nurses might have. So we're really excited to be able to provide that for the folks who are working with us. So a little bit about sort of where we're at so far. So we launched almost 2 years ago. And what we've found is that 16 to 24-year-olds are sort of our most enthusiastic users, which is great because that's exactly what we were aiming for. Our youngest user is 13 because we can't have users younger than 13. So we've had a couple of 12-year-olds and I've been like, I'm sorry, you have to go. I'll see you in a few months. And then our oldest user was 74, which is kind of amazing, and wanted to know about dating as an elderly woman. It was a really beautiful conversation. And so we do have older folks, but we really find that 16 to 24 is that sort of sweet spot for us. And then you can see some other statistics around sort of who's using okayso. We have a large percentage of folks who identify as trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming, which I think really speaks to how little support and education there is out there for folks, and how helpful it can be to have a really personalized conversation with someone who's maybe been through it before, or can help you kind of make some decisions or figure some things out. We also see that about a third of our users ask at least one more question. And I think the most questions, we may have broken this recently, but the most questions that we've been asked by one user is 35. So we definitely have our frequent flyers who, when I see their username pop up, I'm like, cool. And I have some guesses about what they might be asking us about, but sometimes it's a totally new situation. So even though folks are anonymous, we do kind of get to know them a little bit if they're sticking around for a long time. And our longest user has been with us almost since we launched. So we have someone who kind of pops in and out every couple of months, who's been doing that for about a year and over a year and a half with various different kinds of questions. And we get this question a lot. So our average time to our first response from when a user asks a question to when the expert responds is 4.5 hours. So often it's much faster than that. Occasionally it's a bit longer. But we really do try to get back to people as quickly as we can. But we also want to make it clear to folks that we're not a crisis hotline. We're not going to be there for immediate conversations. And so if there is something that needs immediate assistance that a user writes into us about, we make sure that we're getting them connected to whichever sort of crisis service is the most appropriate for their situation and the one that they want to connect to. Of all of our teams, we have like 9 teams. Of all of our teams, the most popular ones in terms of the amount of questions that they get are our dating and relationships team, our sex team, which is like kind of general sexual activity questions, and then stress and self-care. And I'm not very surprised about that because those are 3 topics that people have tons of questions about, but that are often not covered in traditional sexuality education programs. And so we really see ourselves in many ways as filling several different gaps in the world of sexuality, formal sort of sexuality education. And this is one of them in terms of the topics. And I actually have some of the most common questions in all of our teams that I thought folks are often really curious about sort of what people are asking about. So I thought I could share that really briefly here, just so you can see. I won't read through all of them, but these are some of the most common questions that we get in our birth control and pregnancy teams. So lots of questions about birth control. And then the other most common thing is folks who are really worried that they might be pregnant. And a lot of folks like with IUDs or Nexplanons, I think especially because those methods seem fairly invisible, I often wish sometimes that there was like a little light or something that you could check just to make sure your Nexplanon was working, because there's lots of folks who feel really scared that because they can't see it or feel it or they aren't taking a pill every day, like, is it really working? What's happening? So also in STIs and safer sex, lots of questions around like, is this an STI? Could I have been exposed to an STI? And then lots and lots of questions around talking to people about it, disclosing to a new partner, talking with a current partner, and kind of just all of those relationship dynamics that can be really tough for people. And then in our body and anatomy team, lots of questions about penises, as I'm sure anyone who's doing this work is not surprised to hear. And general questions around body image issues, lots and lots of those. You know, I hate my stretch marks, I don't like my belly, does my partner not like my body, etc. And then lots of period questions too. I think there's such a wide range of what periods can be like that it's hard for folks to get a sense of like, is this a normal thing? In terms of identity, we see lots of folks who are questioning and really trying to figure things out. And it's one of my favorite parts about doing this work is to be able to give someone some reassurance that wherever they are is normal and that they don't have to put a label on things and they can just kind of be with what's going on. It's such an amazing opportunity. Stress and self-care. So lots of people who are struggling with anxiety or depression, feeling overwhelmed with school and the pressures of balancing school and sports and friendships and relationships and parents and all of the things that young people are trying to balance. Also feeling those emotional swings and wondering if that's normal. I feel really sad and then really happy. My emotions are so strong. Sort of lots of helping people through those moments. And then in terms of our sex category, probably our number one question ever is, how do I know if I'm having an orgasm? Which I think, again, really speaks to the lack of education around pleasure for folks, that they just aren't sure what's happening. They don't know what they should be trying or not trying, if it's normal to feel something. And then lots of questions about, am I ready to have sex? What will the first time be like? It's hurting me, etc. And we do a lot of talking with folks around like, are you ready? What are the kinds of things you should be thinking about and asking yourself to make that decision? Then dating relationships. So tons and tons of sort of general trust issues and relationship drama. And then lots of folks who are in relationships where one person, usually they're the person in the relationship who feels like things are not going very well, or they're not being treated very well, and the other person is kind of ignoring them or is not treating them well. Occasionally we get the person who's on the other side who's like, am I the sort of Reddit thread of like, am I the asshole? So we do have some of those folks, but we spend a lot of time kind of helping people learn to value their worth and their needs in a relationship. And then breakups, of course. So those are some. I just saw a question, will I provide you with a presentation? I absolutely can, and yes, you may share it. And I also saw someone say you signed up to be a volunteer. I'm gonna put my email at the end. If you are part of this and you sign up to be a volunteer and you wanna volunteer, please email me directly, because I wanna make sure that lots of people apply through the app, but I wanna catch you more specifically. So shoot me an email at the end. So in terms of impact, really briefly, I will just say we've done some surveys with young people. We don't have it built into the app yet. It's something we're working on. As you might anticipate, paying developers is expensive. So it's making improvements goes in little chunks. But we've done some surveys, and we've found that the vast majority of young people feel like they got really good help, that folks feel less alone after using okayso. And I think especially right now, it's really incredibly helpful to have a resource that is doing that for folks. And then we also asked folks about changing behavior after using okayso, and found that over half of folks reported that they changed their behavior in some way. And we actually just ran another survey, and so I have to add some of these in, but it's things like, I went to a therapist, I went for my pap smear, I had a conversation with my partner, I had a conversation with my parents, sort of all of those types of things. And then a lot of it is also really some of that worldview-based things. I thought differently about my situation after talking with the experts. And I think we really, it's hard to measure that. Probably no funder is, in some ways, is going to care as much about that outcome, but that is a truly powerful outcome. If you can help someone shift the way they're thinking about something, it means that down the line, there might be, the implications for future behavior change are so huge. So that is really encouraging to us. So we launched about 2 years ago, and we've answered over 9,000 questions from folks across all 50 states. We've been very fortunate to have been featured by the App Store for World AIDS Day 2 years in a row, fingers crossed for December 1st this year. And it's been really amazing, because we'll get 400, 500 questions in a day, when usually we're not getting quite that many yet. And so our experts work really, really hard to make sure we're getting all of those answered. So where we're headed, very briefly, because I know I have like 2 minutes left, is that we started to realize, as we were talking with nonprofits, that we actually could help nonprofits reach young people remotely as well. And so, we know that direct service and the one-on-one conversations that folks are having are really vital, but it's hard for young people to make appointments and travel. It's hard for staff to meet those needs. And so we've started partnering with nonprofits so that their teams of staff can be on okayso, and so that they can chat with young people on the okayso platform the same way that our experts already are. And we're able to kind of create their own page. Their staff can be on okayso, and GCAP actually is our pilot organization. So thank you, GCAP. We're super excited about that. So if you're interested in potentially hearing more about that, I would love to connect. And we're really excited about being able to support other nonprofits that are doing this work. I know, especially right now, trying to transition immediately to supporting youth remotely is really challenging. So just to wrap up, these are a few of sort of some of the things that users have said to us. I think if we ever doubt that it's possible to serve young people remotely and have an impact in their lives, I want to encourage folks to know that it is absolutely possible. We get the most amazing comments from our users. Thank you for being an emotional support for me when I felt like I had no one. Like, I come back to this every time I'm feeling down, because it really reminds me of why we do this work. So I'm really excited to share all of that with you and to connect with folks throughout the rest of the day. And I'm happy to answer any questions for anyone who has them. I'm gonna pop out of this real quick. Okay. Just looking to see if there are any questions. Brittany, go.
I want to remind everyone to make sure they stop at the expo. We have 6 different booths. And as mentioned before, when you go there, you can watch a quick little video and you can hit the interest button, which is going to automatically send an email directly to that organization to connect with you directly. But yeah. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I know a lot of times everyone's like, how do I talk to young people? And then when you do it, everyone's like, what do I say? And it's like, turn up the human, right? Like, don't be a robot and keep it short.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, and now we're going to load up the next session with some of our young people from our Youth Advisory Board here at GCAP and LaCara. So everyone, see you shortly.